Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Here's my question. What about a private business? What if I own a business? Just I myself personally bought a business. It's with my money. How does this law affect my parking lot that I paid for?
Representative, if your business was at a single-family dwelling and it was your private home, this bill would not cover that, and you could deny someone coming on to your private property if your business was out of that. But if your business is on commercial property, this bill would cover and protect a permit holder. Yes, sir.
See, here's my question for you. I don't understand why, if I myself am the business person and I go to the bank and I get a bank loan and I buy a business, on the corner of 5th and Main Street, and if my business doesn't make money, it's my possessions that are going to be repossessed. In other words, all our business people in this state, they're the people that are creating all the wealth that we then benefit from. They pay for this. They help pay for this room, and they put themselves at great risk. Historically, I think we've taken the position if you own a business, you ought to be able to kind of run the show for that business. My concern about what you just said is that aren't we essentially taking away private property rights of these business owners? I mean, why should we be telling them what to do on their own business? It's different, I understand, for public property, and I could, that would be a different debate. But tell me about these private business people who we're now apparently Tell me about these private business people who this law affects. My understanding is now we're telling private business people you have to let somebody bring a gun on your property. Why are we doing that on private property?
Well, actually, you're mistaken on that, Representative. We are not telling a business what they have to or have not to do. What we're doing is creating an exception that the state of Tennessee will not bring a criminal penalty against a person who has a permit holder to keep a gun locked in their car. We're not denying the business from posting. They can still post. We're not setting policy of how a business deals with its employees. What we're doing is saying, if you've proven to the state of Tennessee legislative body, to the TBI, to the Department of Homeland Security, that you know how to handle a gun, you've been fingerprinted, you've proven to all these people that you're worthy to actually carry a gun on your person, the least we can do as a state, if you want to keep that locked in your car, we're not going to criminalize you for that. That's what this bill does. So it's not going to dictate to a business anything.
Wait a minute. I'm reading your law, and that doesn't look like what it says, sir. It says, unless expressly prohibited by federal law, a holder of a valid handgun carry permit recognized in Tennessee may transport and store a firearm or firearm ammunition in the permit holder's privately owned vehicle while utilizing any public or private parking area. Doesn't that saying if I own a restaurant, my employee can bring a gun in his vehicle on my restaurant property, and it looks like I, as the property owner, have nothing to say about that. Isn't that the way the law works?
Well, Representative Stewart, you can say what you want, but we're saying as a state we're not going to criminalize you.
No, but I think you're also saying that person has the right. In other words, I would be under this law, right? I would be breaking the law if I'm a McDonald's franchisee owner. I spent half my life building up a McDonald's in the middle of my town. And I believe the way this law works, we're now telling that guy, even though it's your property and it's your parking lot, you can't tell somebody, don't bring a gun on my property. I mean, I'm reading. Isn't that what this does?
No, sir. Bill doesn't do that.
Explain that. Tell me about Section A, because I'm reading it. It seems to say just that.
You know what, Representative Stewart, if it would please the chair and the body, I'd suggest we go into recess and allow legal to come and explain that. Is that cool with the body?
Without objection, we will stand at recess. Tom, if you would come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Yes, sir. Tom Tagg from the Office of Legal Services. Do you want me to respond to your question?
Yes, sir.
In an at-will employment state, unless you're a protected class of citizen, you can still have employment consequences even though you engage in legal conduct. If your employee manual says you can't drink at work and you're over 21 and it's legal for you to drink, you can still suffer employment consequences. This bill does not affect what happens or does not happen in the workplace with respect to contracts of employment or employment handbooks.
So what you're saying is if I just want to make sure we're clear on the record, maybe I didn't understand. What you're saying is you interpret the law to be such that if I'm an employer, I can fire any employee who brings a gun onto my property despite the passage of this law.
If you know the employee has the gun,
I can have a policy as an employer to say, you are not allowed to bring a gun onto our property and I will fire you if you do. Is that a legal policy under this law?
yeah, I suspect a lot of employers have that now, and this doesn't affect employer policies. This is just an exception to the criminal law, the posting law about having a firearm in a posted area.
So your understanding of this law is the intention is that a private employer has the right to maintain a policy to keep guns off his or her property. You think that's the way the law works?
With respect to employees, now invitees, guests, customers, clients, those folks, but as with respect to employees, yes, I think that's the intent of it.
So you think what we're saying is if I, to use my analogy, if I have built up this McDonald's, I can fire my employees if they bring guns onto the property, but I have no control over what other people bring onto my property.
If you are holding yourself out as a business and want clients and customers, and yes, there's nothing you can do to them, but because they're not your employee.
So what this law does is it says all these other private people who I don't have the power to fire, they can bring guns onto my property whether I like it or not.
Correct.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Representative Womack, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just clarify. So, if you give me a yes or no answer, that'll be perfect. Currently, right now, what we have is individuals permit holders bringing their guns wherever they want to anyway. Even if a business posts and says, no, you do not, we do not want you to bring your gun onto our property, people are doing it. So what this law really does, it doesn't stop the businesses from saying you can't bring your gun on this property. And it doesn't stop the business from firing an individual or laying them off for 2 weeks of some sort of punishment. But what it does do is, one, it provides liability protection to the business, and it does not allow the business to have this individual arrested under a criminal procedure in the state of Tennessee. Is that correct?
Say that's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions for Tom? Tom, thank you. Without objection, we are back in session. Representative Dennis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of clarifications. As I read the bill, it's got two basic sections. The first section creates an exception from prosecution for those three separate firearms offenses if the individual is a permit holder and the firearm stays in their vehicle either in the trunk, glove box, or otherwise concealed. We're creating an exception to prosecution under those statutes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In addition, we are creating in the next section civil liability exemption from civil liability for an employer or anyone who allows for those processes being carried out. If an employee is carrying pursuant to this section on that property, then the employer has immunity from civil liability.
That's correct.
Okay. This is an excellent compromise on this issue. This is a much different bill than what was presented last year and coined a safe commute bill or whatever some of the folks wanted to call it. This is an outstanding compromise. We should have done this 2 years ago. We didn't for various political reasons, what have you. But you've got a great bill here. This does two very important things. It does not affect, the way I read it, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't appear to me to affect a property owner, an individual's right to control their property as they see fit. It just takes the government out of that enforcement mechanism. Is that your understanding of it? Okay. So an employer, if they choose to have a policy about firearms being on their property, they can have that policy, and this doesn't negatively affect their ability to have that policy in any way?
Correct.
think you got a good bill here. Appreciate it.
And